This is District Council 37, State of the Union, the public service journal of our city's largest public employee union, representing more than 120,000 everyday heroes, from accountants to zookeepers who make our city run. And now, District Council 37 Executive Director Lillian Roberts and her guests.
Hello, and welcome to the State of the Union. I am District Council 37 Secretary Cliff Koppelman, sitting in for District Council 37 Executive Director Lillian Roberts. Joining me today as co-host is District Council 37 Associate Director Henry Garrido. Mayor Bloomberg is once again trying to balance the budget on the backs of the city's public employees. This time, it's the dedicated public workers at the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. Recently, more than 160 of these workers providing vital services at NYCHA senior citizen and community centers and other areas received layoff notices. Meanwhile, NYCHA wastes millions on private contracts but still fails to make necessary repairs to public housing units, leaving residents living in deplorable conditions and with inadequate services. Joining us today to talk about the union's fight back efforts are Juan Ortiz, Secretary-Treasurer, Social Service Employees Local 371, and Fitz Reed, President of Health Services Employees Local 768. NYCHA's problems have continued for quite a while, so this is a good time to describe what's been going on and what the problems are and how we're going to try to solve problems and what we're facing in these issues. So you can tell us from the perspective of the two locals that are here, Local 371 and Local 768, just what your members do and how it's affecting them.
Well, our members work in the community center as well as they provide social services throughout the housing authority. Has been happening since the year 1952. The social and community services was created because it was a need. You had at that time, a lot of people that had social issues that needed to be dealt with, so it was created. It was a cost-effective creation because by educating the resident, they would become better neighbor, they would be less damaged. So they created community center throughout the housing authority. And the community center are basically the living room of every development. And that's where everybody congregate, providing the community center provide all kinds of services. And has been going on for quite a while. But it wasn't until recently that the New York City Housing Authority, new philosophy, not the Housing Authority, but the administration decided that they were going to get out of social services. For what reason, we do not know. It's not cost effective. It's created disruption in the life of the resident. And truth be told, it comes at a time that is needed even more. Mm-hmm.
They were just going to stop and not provide the service any longer?
They just decided philosophically that they were not going to provide any more social services to the resident. The economy of it is that they contend that they don't have the funding for it, but we have proved time and time and again that they do have the funding. Most recently, back in the summer, they tried to fire about 500 people from the Housing Authority, our members. They say that they needed $48 million. What we did was that we went and battled. I'm saying when I say we, with District Council 37, Local 371, and all the other local, and we mounted a campaign in the City Council. And lo and behold, we came up not only with $48 million, but we came up with $58 million to cover the cost. Most recently, with the authority data, they say that by the end of the year, having the money, they say that they still wanted to lay off people and furlough people.
Just so it's clear, the services that are provided, could you tell us some of those services, what exactly they give to people?
Well, basically, you name it. It runs the gamut. A community center is like a holistic social services program. They provide after-school programs.
Okay.
They provide youth crime prevention. Okay. Senior citizen, this is the only place that they have really to go. It provides counseling, and on and on and on and on. It's like a mini all
A community-type
Encompass,
meeting
yeah.
and just so.
Yeah.
And this is indicative of what the Housing Authority has been doing, consistently cutting vital programs under the whole discussion that there's no funding for it.
Right.
But yet it appears that the administration is looking to privatize some of those services
Right.
to other entities and other community service. So the funding for the privatization of the services seems to be there, but at the same time, they're arguing that the funding for the people who provide the vital services is not available to provide. And I think Brother Fritz has some of the members that are some of the lowest paid city workers in the entire city, not alone the Housing Authority. And they seem to be intent to eliminate some of those. Can you tell us a little bit about the Resident Watch program and what it means to the community as well, Brother Fritz?
NYCHA has 334 developments and 2,560 buildings. And within that scope, we have 125 residential watch. And what they do is really to coordinate other volunteers, right? And out of this 150, if someone hears it, someone will say, look, they are going to lay off 150 people, full-time people. These are not full-time people. These are part-time people. Just get a mere stipend, 2 hours per day. 2 hours per day, and they go around. Sometimes they give 4-hour services, and they coordinate a number of people. So it multiplies. But the important thing is, if you have so many residents, so many apartments, so many buildings, so many development, in truth and in fact, these NYCHA with the Section 8, right? They support 7.6% of the population of New York City. And we are speaking about 125 persons who work 2 hours per day and coordinate a host of people. The services they provide is to be the eyes and the ears, to encourage the youths, to encourage the people, to maintain security and stability, to make sure that there's less vandalism, to make sure that there's less hooliganism, make sure that the buildings are kept clean. They go around and coordinate these things. All it costs is about $500,000 to provide all of these services for these buildings and apartments for NYCHA.
For all of those buildings, we're talking about how many employees?
125 that want to get rid of.
For all the buildings that
For the
NYCHA
buildings.
serves.
That's right.
And the worst part about it, they need the services. And they not only want to get rid of them, they say when they get rid of other workers, they push the work on other people. These couple of people we're talking about, the 125 of them, they want them to come back and volunteer, to work for nothing, to give 4-hour services. And we would not tolerate that in any other service. But because the workers are part of the institution, part of NYCHA, then they do not mind serving. Just a token they're getting.
And I think one of the problems we've had is NYCHA has always used this idea that there's been federal defunding into public housing, and that is a reality.
Okay.
We have seen a defunding in general from the federal government, and most recently, due to sequestration and continuing resolution and the ultimate shutdown of the government, there were funding that would go into the housing authority that is no longer being there. Social services, on the other hand, is something that is not only needed, but could be funded through other sources. The way that the Department for the Aging, Department of Youth and Community Development. So what the union has proposed is that there's such a small, minuscule amount of money in order to provide such various services is to simply have those agencies provide the funding to NYCHA so the NYCHA can continue to provide the services to the tenants and to the citizens in general. But it seems that the Housing Authority is intent on taking out their inefficiencies and balancing the budget on the backs of the workers.
I think is that the truth be told is the mismanagement, really, because I've been working for the Housing Authority for 34 years. And the reality of the matter is that everybody understood that social services is a very important service in the Housing Authority. But what happened is that they need that the administration, because I'm part of the Housing Authority, I like to think that I'm Housing Authority too. The administration, the new administration under John Rear and others, had already decided that they don't want to be part of social services. But more importantly, we suspect that there has to be more to it. Has to be other hidden reason there. Some people speculate that maybe it's because they want the community center to be converted into housing stock. Maybe they want to create venue to build more houses for high-income resident. So we can speculate into that, but it's not. We don't see the need for the housing authority financially. The money's out there. We provided money for them, not we, but the city, through the city council. But it's still, to this day, they just send letters of risk letter, which is layoff letter,
Right.
to about 200 people. Totally unnecessary, because this is where we are in the so-called holidays.
Right.
There's the Thanksgiving. Here come joyous moments such as the holidays, and now you sitting home and you get a letter saying that you're not going to have a job at the end of the year. I've been very mean-spirited,
Right.
So that's what we've been saying, is that we have a new administration coming in, and we do believe in, and we're quite hopeful that we can negotiate with this new administration. So the administration, the old administration, could have waited, and we will find ways to, but they wanted to do it before they leave, and they leave in the 31st of December.
Right, the
so
31st.
why don't they just leave it alone, and we can negotiate with the new administration?
How dependent is this on federal funds?
The New York City Housing Authority is almost entirely dependent on federal funding to provide for the services. The City of New York has provided very little money. And as a matter of fact, this is why the opposite. The New York City Housing Authority pays the City of New York for services that nobody else pays.
Oh.
Pays for police, for sanitation, for sewage, for water. It even pays taxes in the form of a payment in lieu of taxes. And what we asked for and suggested during the budget process, that since the Housing Authority was facing budget shortfall due to the federal government being shut down, is that the city suspends those payments for at least 2 years. But as Juan mentioned, working with the city council, we were able to restore more than enough to provide the funding. Mind
Okay.
you, the city budget is from July to June.
That's right, July
So
to
the
June.
budget for the city is already set until next June.
Right.
So it's unconscionable what they're doing to try to lay off people by the beginning of the year, right? 3 days until the new administration. So we believe this is a mean-spirited last shot by the Bloomberg administration and by the administration of the Housing Authority, and that it has no correlation to the funding decline from the federal government that we have seen.
One of the points that we ought to emphasize is that housing is a prime need in New York City. The NYCHA housing, these things were created from 1934 under the New Deal to deal with unemployment, to deal with housing problem. And right now, that's exactly what we have. NYCHA own task force in 2011 said, look, we need these residential watch people. We need to expand the program. Instead of expanding the program, they are cutting the program. Instead of maintaining the housing stock that we have, they are trying to cut the housing stock, right? And therefore, this is going contrary to what the society needs, contrary to the expectation of the tenant, contrary to what the society actually need to grow. In truth and in fact, they should be expanding the housing now to deal with the unemployment right that we have right now and the high demand for housing.
Is this problem started before RIA, or he just exacerbated it?
Well, I just got to say that the problem, as they call it, it was financial. And it was found that the authority is sitting at $1 billion when you spend funds. They're not spending the fund expeditiously. So what happened is, because the federal provide funding as you need it, really. So when you don't spend fund, they're going to fund you for even less. The money is not being spent, I would say, productively. It's not being spent at all. So when we speak about having an issue, where's the issue if it comes to economic? The monies are there, and we found that time and time again. Repair not been made, but the monies are there. Most recently, the council provided money for camera to provide more security, and they, maybe 2 or 3 are installed right now. They provided a lot of millions of dollars, so the money is sitting in the bank. So the problem in reality is mismanagement. That's what it
Right.
basically
The
is.
authorization for
let's-
things like that has to come through management.
The biggest problem, so, you know, I think I totally agree with Juan. So there is a real issue, which is defunding of public housing
Right.
by the federal government, as Brother Fitz mentioned. And there is another huge problem of mismanagement within the housing authority. And Juan mentioned the millions
Right.
that they were sitting on for repairs. At the same time, there was a backlog of over 250,000 repairs that have not taken place. But I think NYCHA also suffers from another problem, which is there's been a complete disassociation by the state, by the city of New York, and what is the housing authority now today. There is a sense that because the housing authority is funded by the federal government, that the city is only an spectator to, you know, to
Right.
some degree
An
of what
overseer.
housing.
Right.
And so I have to say that the city council stepping up and trying to force the housing authority to do certain things, report certain repairs that have not taken place, it's a step in the right direction. And I know that, you know, the city council has been doing a lot to try to hold NYCHA accountable. The problem is NYCHA as an institution is not a city agency. So when the mismanagement is taking place, when the things have to be corrected and fixed, when there's money that is being unspent, when there's waste of millions of dollars in consultant contracts and services, you know, it is who is responsible,
Right, who's gonna chase 'em?
who's going to make NYCHA, hold NYCHA accountable for not doing these things. I think that it's important for us to also discuss the role of the city and the state on this, because it's not a city agency, it's not a state agency, it's kind of one of those entities that were created years and years and years ago, and it seemed to float around
Well,
and alone.
I hate to
you know,
use the term, but
services.
maybe the city or the city council or even under the new mayor should create some kind of a commission that investigates the operation of this authority to keep them on the
Yeah,
ball.
but to that end, you know, we have a congressional delegation. That's what we've been calling, just, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because the funding are provided by the Fed. The congressional delegation has a responsibility to oversee what is being done in the housing authority. And we've been calling for a while now for the congressional delegation to step up.
Right.
Because this is part of the role, this is part of the job. Most recently, we had a meeting at the 237, local 237, with Brother Greg Floyd out there, and we called for this. The Central Labor Council has stepped up to this, and we got some of the congressional delegation, members of the congressional delegation, to come to a meeting. We calling for them to do an audit of the books, because in reality, there's a lot of hearsay and a lot of speculation, but we have not looked at the book correctly, and we're asking for that to happen. Once that happens, we will. I strongly believe that it will show that the authority has the money. It's just that it's being mismanaged. You have all kinds of money that is going out of the window, the back window, in reality, and we're not seeing why that money is being spent. We don't see the result of those expenditures. So essentially, what we're saying here is that yes, the city council has the housing committee run by the chair of that committee is Rosie Mendez, and we call on Rosie Mendez also to step up to the plate and sort of, you know, do something about the decision she has. But the thing is that, as Henry says before, the authority is not a city agency. By not being a city agency, they feel they're not legally bound to the city council. So that means that they have to be legally bound to somebody. But the housing authority is also a corporation. That it was incorporated under the state. So they have a constitution also, and they are violating the constitution right now because back in the day, they came up with the Green Amendment. The Green Amendment was Congressman Green, and he instituted an amendment to expenditure of federal expenditure. And what he says essentially was, in the amendment, was that anytime money is going to be spent or any issue is going to be made, the direct recipient of those funds, which are the tenant, need to have an input in it. The authority has not conducted any hearing about getting out of the social services. They're just doing it on their own. I suspect that it's illegal. We're looking at the legality of that with our attorney, and we will take further step if we need to.
Yeah, it would seem to me that that's one of the main places to go. The money is coming from someplace. The people sending the money have a responsibility they should have a responsibility to know how it's being spent and who's spending it. And then on the other end, when it comes in, somebody should be responsible for what they're doing with it.
Sir Cliff, you know, one of the things I do not understand, when we were growing up, our houses and our community were spread out.
Right.
Now we have 1,000, 2,000 people going up that way in different buildings. We're bound to have the need for social workers. We have so many people go through 2 doors to go in buildings. How can you have children, you have older people, you have the confusion. You need to have the social network. These services ought to be provided for them, and protection for them. You know, the city has a responsibility to ensure that we have the social services, just as your president said the other day at the rally, that we need the social services to maintain the community, to keep that fabric working together, so that instead of just individual, we now have community and we protect them through the residential
It's all
watch.
together, because, you know, Bloomberg's big thing was, I'm an education mayor. But if you don't have a place to live, or you don't have a safe place to walk around or work in or get help, then education suffers.
Right.
And that means that the whole population suffers, families and their children.
And I think that what we're talking about the rally, I think one of the things that we saw in the rally is that it wasn't just a union calling for a major overhaul of the housing authority and for monitoring and keeping them accountable. It was community groups, it was people who had tenants that were coming out, because this is an issue that just doesn't affect the working people in the housing authority. We're talking about 600,000 people, right? As Fitz mentioned, a very large portion of our population, which not only are entitled to receive service, but deserve services.
Right.
And you're talking about the population that is most vulnerable. You're talking about, the senior citizens, the people who are at, who already at a certain age. You're talking about the youth. You're talking about kids whose option will be either being on the streets or the potential of being enrolled into a gang or recruited into a gang or coming into a youth center in the housing authority. So we could talk about the cost of this, which is very minuscule in the context of a $70 billion budget. But I think that there's also a case to be made for the value of those services that are being provided in those centers.
It has to be, because it touches everybody. One way or another, it's going to touch everybody. See,
but the housing authority in itself is not a city within the city. The building belongs to the community. They part of an integral part of the community overall. The center themselves, they just don't provide services to the resident or NYCHA, but they provide to the whole community, services to the whole community. And as Fritz was referring to Anthony Well, which is the president of Local 371, he has a grasp on it because he, not only does he have family there, he grew up around authority and friends, and so do most of us. We have a large group of residents that are also city workers in the housing authority. See, so it's not that is an institution that is secluded. The housing authority is not. It's part of the overall community. So that means that when we grew up, all of us, we grew up around developing what we call project or whatever you wish to call it. Still, it's the same people. The guy that is 3 blocks away from a development lives in a private home, but still they have a friend that lives in the
connection is not broken.
So the connections are there. Now, what some people have attempted to do was to sort of segregate the housing authority, like something that is, and we are not. Back in the days, it wasn't that they were building reservation; they were building. When 1934, the whole thing started. In 1934, the housing authority became a law, and at that time, primarily the inhabitants of the housing authority were Irish, Italian.
Depends on which group came in.
So it was people that were low income. okay, and people that needed the hardworking people, you know, because throughout the years, some people tried to stigmatize the housing authority about being where all the hoodlums hang out, where all these criminals
Right.
hang out. So therefore, let them eat cake, as he would say.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, these are our brothers and sisters. These are human beings, you know, that are there, and we know them. They are me. They are you. We all have history with the housing authority. It's something that you can just say, we're going to step away from it. Now, there's a lot of lip service that's been provided about low income and affordable housing. Right now, we have a massive, massive amount of people out there in the street without houses. So you start taking away the social services, and what's going to happen? Things are going to become deplorable. People are going to start, you know, really doing things that they don't really want to do, but there will not going to be anybody there to help them, and on and on and on. So I don't see how cost-effective in terms of saving money, as Mr. Reyes says. How can you save money when it's like being penny wise and dollar foolish? In the long end, it's going to cost you more. Yeah.
It's very simple. When you improve the services and when you improve the ability to move on, you uplift everybody. Everybody gets taken with them, and they see somebody doing it, the next person does it, and then the population is made better for it. So you're right, and we just got to keep after them and keep after every politician involved, every place that the money comes from, and just stay on them, and hopefully we'll be successful and not lose people this way.
Just to conclude, I think that we look forward to having a conversation with the new administration
Oh, yes.
over the issue of the housing authority,
Okay.
because we think it's very, very vital.
Well, thank you very much. This has really been enlightening, I think, for anybody who would listen to it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What do you think of the way NYCHA is being run right now?
Oh, Mike is being mismanaged, and what's more important, though, they're going to privatize community services and senior centers, and that's what they're doing right now. But the whole operation and no commitment to providing real services directly by NYCHA is the problem. Okay, these workers have been working in NYCHA for a lot of years, gave their life blood to this agency, and now because their philosophy is to get out of the business, as they walk out the door, they put 160 people at risk of losing their job. It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
Well, at one point it was 350 for one local and 225 for my local. So we don't know what's going to happen. We fought it back once, but it may come back again.
NYCHA keeps saying that they're broke, while meantime they're wasting millions and millions of dollars in hiring these private consultants when they could be hiring DC 37 workers, which a big percentage of DC 37 members live in public housing.
I feel it's my duty to come down here and just be in solidarity with the DC 37 members. They work in our buildings. They're actually unique because they live in our buildings also, so they're not just employees. And I think coming down here, being in solidarity with them as a resident is very important, because we are facing a thing called infill. Infill basically is when NYCHA wants to develop luxury high-rises on public property, public housing property, basically building on parking lots, playgrounds, and things of that nature, community centers, and they want to do away with that. So not only are we facing that, but you know, they're going to be facing losing their homes and their jobs. So
it's a shame that housing authority sent us notices. 163 people got a notice. Happy Thanksgiving and Merry Christmas. Housing authority don't understand, because they don't come out to the field to see what we do every single day. We work by ourselves most of the time. We do 10 jobs. We only get one paycheck. Now they want to take away our damn paycheck. Well, we are here to tell them, hell no. You're not going to take away our jobs. Our public assets, not for sale. Our public assets, not for sale.
Thank you for watching. Until next time, I am District Council 37 Secretary Cliff Koppelman, sitting in for District Council 37 Executive Director Lillian Roberts.
To learn more about DC 37, go to dc37.net.